Søren Kierkegaard, a Danish philosopher and theologian, emerged in 19th century Copenhagen as a fierce critic of the dominant intellectual climate. He wasn't just a thinker, but a true rebel with a pen. It was a time when grand systems of thought, like Hegel's absolute idealism, dominated philosophical discourse. These systems tried to explain everything through complex and universal structures. Kierkegaard, however, felt deeply troubled by these systems, seeing them as detached from the raw, living experience of being human. For him, philosophy needed to be closer to everyday reality. He believed that philosophy had become too abstract, too focused on universal truths, and had lost sight of the individual. His mission was to bring attention back to personal and subjective experience. Kierkegaard chose to write under pseudonyms, adopting different personalities to explore various facets of his philosophical ideas. This method allowed him to express a wider range of perspectives. This unconventional approach reflected his belief that truth isn't something you passively receive, but something you actively construct through personal involvement. Every individual had to find their own truth. Kierkegaard's philosophy is characterized by its attention to the subjective experience of individual existence. Each person lives their own existence in a unique and unrepeatable way. He was deeply concerned with the human condition, exploring themes like choice, responsibility, anxiety, and the search for meaning in a seemingly absurd world. These themes were central to his work. His writings, often passionate and provocative, challenged the intellectual complacency of his time and continue to resonate with readers today. His works are still studied and admired. Kierkegaard's legacy lies in his pioneering role in the development of existentialism. He blazed new trails in philosophical thought. He emphasized the importance of individual freedom, the weight of choice, and the unavoidable anxieties that accompany human existence. Every decision carries with it a responsibility. By placing the individual at the center of his philosophy, Kierkegaard offered a powerful alternative to the grand narratives of his time and continues to inspire reflection on the human condition. His influence is still evident today. Kierkegaard's philosophy stood in stark contrast to the dominant Hegelianism of his time. While Hegel sought to build an all-encompassing philosophical system, Kierkegaard focused on the individual and subjective experience, on the single. Hegel proposed a system of absolute idealism, which postulated that reality is fundamentally rational and knowable through the process of dialectical reason. He believed that each phase of history was a step towards greater understanding and self-awareness. Hegel believed that history was progressing towards a final and absolute state of knowledge and self-awareness. This dialectical process was seen as inevitable and universal. Kierkegaard found Hegel's system excessively deterministic and impersonal. For him, Hegel's emphasis on rationality and collective history neglected the importance of the individual. He rejected the idea that history had a telos, an intrinsic purpose, or that reason alone could grasp the complexities of human existence. Kierkegaard argued that human life is full of uncertainties and paradoxes that cannot be resolved through a rational system. For Kierkegaard, the subjective experience of the individual, with all its uncertainties and contradictions, was fundamental. He believed that each person must face their own fears and doubts in a personal and direct way. He argued that Hegel's system neglected the role of personal choice, the weight of freedom, and the existential angst that comes from navigating a world without guaranteed answers. Kierkegaard's critique of Hegel centered on the importance of the individual's relationship with existence. He believed that each person must find their own meaning and purpose in life. He believed that philosophy shouldn't try to build grand systems, but rather to illuminate the lived experience of the individual. Truth, according to Kierkegaard, was subjective and personal. While Hegel emphasized the objective and the universal, Kierkegaard stressed the subjective and the particular. This fundamental difference reflected their different views of the world and philosophy. Kierkegaard argued that the individual's relationship with God is intensely personal and cannot be mediated by any abstract system of thought. Faith was a matter of passion and personal commitment. He rejected the Hegelian notion of a collective or historical spirit, emphasizing instead the solitary nature of faith. For Kierkegaard, faith was a personal and unique journey. For Kierkegaard, faith wasn't a matter of intellectual assent, but a leap into the unknown, a passionate commitment made in the face of uncertainty. This leap of faith represented the courage to embrace uncertainty and live authentically. At the heart of Kierkegaard's philosophy lies a deep emphasis on the individual. He believed that the true self is not something given, but something achieved through a process of self-creation. This process, however, is not without its challenges. Kierkegaard recognized that the individual faces immense pressure from society to conform, adopt predetermined roles, and live inauthentic lives. He called this pressure the crowd and saw it as a threat to true individuality. For Kierkegaard, becoming an individual requires a conscious effort to break free from the crowd, resist conformity, and embrace one's unique path. This journey of self-discovery is marked by uncertainty, doubt, and anxiety. It is not a comfortable process, but it is through this struggle that the individual can achieve true authenticity. Kierkegaard believed that the individual is defined by their choices. He saw choice as both a burden and a liberation. It is a burden because it entails responsibility and the possibility of regret, but it is also liberating because it allows the individual to shape their own destiny. Kierkegaard's focus on the individual has had a profound impact on existentialist thought. His work emphasizes the importance of personal responsibility, the role of choice in shaping one's identity, and the need to find meaning in a world devoid of intrinsic purpose. Kierkegaard proposed 3 stages of existence that an individual might go through on their journey of self-discovery, a path that is as personal as it is universal. These stages are the aesthetic stage, the ethical stage, and the religious stage. These stages are not meant to be rigid categories, but rather fluid and overlapping modes of being, each influencing the others. An individual might move between these stages throughout their life depending on the experiences they have and the choices they make. The aesthetic stage is characterized by a hedonistic pursuit of pleasure and sensory experience, where the individual is constantly seeking new thrills. The aesthete tries to live life to their fullest, indulging in art, music, and romantic love, trying to avoid boredom. However, this pursuit of pleasure is ultimately unsatisfying, leading to boredom and a sense of inner emptiness, a bit like the protagonist of D'Annunzio's The Child of Pleasure, who ultimately finds himself trapped in his own pursuit of pleasure. The ethical stage is characterized by a commitment to moral principles and social responsibility, where the individual seeks to live a life of integrity. The ethical individual recognizes the importance of duty, obligation, and living a virtuous life, trying to do the right thing. We might think of a modern example of civic engagement like that of Liliana Segre, who has dedicated her life to justice and historical memory. While the ethical stage represents a step forward from the aesthetic, it can also become a trap if it leads to a rigid and legalistic approach to life, limiting spontaneity. The religious stage is the highest stage of existence, according to Kierkegaard, where the individual seeks a deeper meaning. It is characterized by a leap of faith, an absolute commitment to God that transcends reason and logic, requiring complete trust, like St. Francis, who abandoned everything to follow his faith, renouncing material possessions for a life of devotion. The religious individual embraces the paradox and absurdity of faith, recognizing that God cannot be grasped through rational understanding, but only through spiritual experience. These stages represent different ways of relating to oneself, to others, and to the world, offering a map for personal growth. Kierkegaard believed that it is through the process of moving through these stages, of confronting the limitations of each, that the individual can achieve a fuller and more meaningful existence, finding a balance between pleasure, duty, and faith.